I'm calling to order North Shore School District 112 Reconfiguration 2.0 Committee meeting. It is June 13th, 7 p.m. May I get a roll call?
Ryan.
Yes.
Julie. Ira. Megan. Jory. Kenneth. Rocky.
Yes.
Melissa.
Yes.
Ivan. Raphael.
Yes.
Mark.
Lawrence?
Mark L.
Yeah.
Carol L. Darren.
Yep.
Jeff.
Here.
Ann.
Here.
Dan R. Davis. Helen. Ronald.
Yep.
Mark. M. Mark F.
That's me.
Carol D. Brian.
Yes.
Rick.
Here.
Dan.
Here.
Lori.
Here.
Becky.
Here.
One shy of.
Come on, groups. Somebody will come in.
Helen will be here.
We're not voting on that. We
Has
might make recommendations.
Has Dan Jenks resigned yet?
I did, yeah.
Just stay away.
We put it back on for an hour.
Can I get a motion to approve this agenda?
Can you do that without a quorum?
Can you do
I don't
that?
have one.
Oh. Can I get like a gesture?
Go right to the topics, because
Yeah.
we can't.
Alrighty, so would anyone like to make a public comment? I don't think so.
Wait a minute. Carol Lazarus hasn't come in like a year, right?
You're voting someone live?
What?
You're gonna vote someone live?
Well, we need a quorum.
You need a quorum for a vote though, to vote someone.
It has to be
Oh.
a board decision.
Okay.
If you want to make anyone want to complain, you have to.
But she
walk-
can't.
I know.
That came on.
And she didn't come. I know.
Yes, at our request.
Hold on.
Yeah.
He's gonna go retreat to the clamoring group and stay
Okay.
outside.
Just checking if anyone.
Nobody, no riffraff in the hallway?
He's dead out on the.
Nice try.
Do you want us to read this over?
I just wanted to share, I shared with you a copy of the rough draft with each of the visuals of it, so you have that for your reading pleasure and note-taking tonight. And I'm just handing out Model 16's updated site plan, not for necessarily specific discussions for tonight, just so you have that copy with you.
Which is now C.
Model C, what used to be AKA number 16. Indian Trail, Elm Place site. It's 2 pages. If I hand you extra.
Is Link calling in or we calling?
Link is calling in, so I don't really have any chairperson comments other than thank you all to everyone who showed up and participated. It was really well received based on everything I've heard and seen overall. I think people were, eager to see and eager to share, and it was exhausting and so.
Can we ask Nicholas to comment on kind of how you thought it went from an engagement side compared to March? Sort of what, I guess, your expectations, what did you see?
No, I was overwhelmed by the attendance. I was overwhelmed by the eagerness to offer feedback. I never perceived that people would go right for the boards. The event started, people went right for the boards and then settled back into their seats. As anyone knows that attended the first night, there was a little snafu with the acoustics. We were able to get it to a better point the next night. And yeah, so we'll just put that in all of that into the learning bucket. But I think that just like the first event, I think it was very positive. I think people were impressed about how many options they were actually being presented with, and not just a couple. So I think it was a successful night.
Mr. Sprangers is recognized,
Yeah.
Mr. Septon for sure.
We have a
So,
quorum.
Ryan is showing up and we don't have a quorum. I move we approve the minutes.
Right.
How many times it happens to me every day?
You're greeted by a round of applause when you walk in the room.
We have a newfound sense of legitimacy now. This is
I
amazing.
retract my statement.
You can't unring a bell.
Okay,
Lovely
there was a
video.
motion and a second to approve the minutes.
All those in favor of approving those minutes?
Aye.
And can we approve tonight's agenda as well? Can I get a motion for that?
I move to approve tonight's agenda. Second.
All those in favor?
Can we vote on plans?
I have a question regarding the agenda. As we discuss some of the results from the meeting, I think it'd be a good idea if, while we're doing it, we bring up thoughts on things that might be covered in the focus group.
On it. Right. So,
Spot on.
yes.
You have a spot to record that?
So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from Link, who I believe are waiting very patiently on the phone. And I think that the way that they want to approach the work tonight is to cover some major takeaways from the forum and then move on to planning and focus group. So they'll be supporting us. Thank you.
Do you want to cover the language from the rules of timeline from now?
Yeah, do you want to
Sure.
speak to that? Sure.
So, I mean, we were just sort of contemplating the timeline of the process, Darren. You were kind of thinking out loud about, it'd be nice to vote on models or something like
Joking.
that. I know you were joking. I know you're joking, but it's also true that we will need to do that in relatively short order. So, I think that the final sort of winnowing process to determine the three that we feel we should progress to a board recommendation really needs to be completed by, John, you were saying basically July 5.
Basically by July 5th, we should be fairly comfortable on our way. We should be down to our 3 with maybe some final tweaking. Because we have the right to report, evaluate. At that point, we'll be assessing the feedback from the focus groups, just to make sure that it fell in line with everything. So we are going to be doing some windowing and conversation about the windowing without the actual data of the focus groups.
Yeah.
If it doesn't diminish them, we're going to see what that data tells us. If that data all of a sudden comes in off compared to every other data point we've had to this point.
Yeah.
Don't overuse the word point too many times. But as we've collected all this data, we've kind of gotten to this juncture where we have points, take some action, and the next data set supports that, we keep on moving. If there's a very contrary set of data that comes back on us, we reassess at that point.
Yeah. So as we're having the conversation about what to put into the focus group discussion, to your point, Rick, we need to be also thinking about what are, and we're only going to have partial feedback for tonight, right? We've got the raw,
This is the raw part of it.
faithfully transcribed Post-it notes.
Yeah, this is not exit data yet.
We don't have the exit survey yet, we have comments from Link, but we're not, regardless, by the end of tonight, we're not going to have all of the feedback from the engagement forum. So we need to start to hypothesize what those differentiating characteristics and decision drivers are going to be.
Are there approaches, are there themes, are there ways we could be kind of looking at this over the next day or two to bring to the next meeting?
Because we don't have any action items on the agenda, we're not planning on, we're not in a position to vote on anything to win out tonight. But we can start to postulate that.
Start casting our eyes, start listening.
Bless you.
Can I ask a question on this feedback? Is there, aside from reading each line, is there something that Link does that helps us figure out what's positive and negative, whether it's like bubble charting or?
Yeah, they produce really fun things.
Yeah, so they'll
Because
produce.
some of the feedback here is benign,
Or Benel.
Yeah.
Yeah, Link will talk a little bit tonight about their main takeaways from the feedback, and the kind of executive summary of the feedback. But there's no, I guess, equation that could tell us, based on this meeting, there's a golden answer, so.
There's no like ranking of strong positive,
Yeah,
slightly
I
positive,
think they-
neutrals, there is or not?
I'm not sure, so
Okay.
let's,
Fair enough.
yeah, we'll tune in.
Shall we turn, with that seems like a
Yeah, let's do it. So
lovely
Corey and Josh,
softball
are
of
you
a
still there?
transition.
Yes, we are. How's it going?
Doing well.
So we don't have remote mics set up, can you hear me?
Nope.
But yeah.
So yeah, I'll help translate any questions that come up.
Perfect. Cool. So that latest question regarded positive versus negative feedback. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The question was, how are those 1,000 Post-it notes going to turn into a synthesized interpretive feedback? Yeah.
So we've begun to take basically overall takeaways from each of the models and created basically summaries of what those look like. They're not quite ready to share yet, but there will be a memo with all those summaries plus basically an overall key takeaway of what we're seeing across the models. We don't want to get too reductionist in how, or formulaic in how we interpret the data, but there are some pretty clear trends by model that we can help to tease out. Does that help?
Yeah.
Great. Josh, do you want to add anything to that?
No, what I wanted to say is we're going to review sort of things at the 50,000 foot level, give you some of our feedback, and then I'm going to ask Corey to actually walk through the models and give maybe one or two observations that we've made to date. And then we can touch on focus groups and how we want to approach those.
Hey, Josh.
So, as you all are, yes, go ahead.
One quick question just about the 1,000 posted notes. Do you guys have are you digitizing, do you have the capability to create like word cloud for each one of those concepts? You know what I'm talking about?
Yep, absolutely. We can definitely do that, and we can include that in the memo if you like.
Thank you. I'd be interested to see what it looked like.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's whatever words appear the most frequently are bigger. So you see it's like a scatter plot of words, and any words that appear frequently are in larger font. Words that appear very seldom are tiny, so you kind of see it
Right.
at a glance. Kind of what are the words that people use a lot for
The
that.
spelling here is kind of, yeah.
Dodgy?
Needs to fix some of the
sketchy.
typos.
We need a
Somebody didn't go to Hamburg
we need a
school, so I'm gonna say.
we need a spelling subcommittee.
Something
Would you
like
chair
that.
that?
Something like that.
We also need a
Correct.
grammar one, so.
Well, and I
Yeah,
guess
let me know who gets elected to that post.
before we dig into the initial takeaways from last week, can you give us a time frame for when we can anticipate the work that is still in process? I know that we ran into some challenges with the exit survey. So when do you think, just in terms of sort of processing the information, but also, using that work to inform the focus groups, when do you think we can hope to see the rest of that?
So, as I understand it, there's sort of a placeholder meeting on the calendar for Thursday. If it's okay, I'd like to take the next 48 hours to put this together for you, and we can have you something by the end of the day on Thursday, if that timeline makes sense.
And you think that that's adequate time for you? Because we also have a meeting on Monday, and we want to make sure that we have as complete a picture as possible. So what makes sense?
But even if we had the meeting on Monday, I'd still like to have it on Thursday.
If it's realistic, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love to give people as much time to read through it as possible.
Great.
What I would say is what we can give you by Thursday would likely be a little bit more of a draft than a final version. If there are unanswered questions to what we put in front of you by Thursday, you can let us know and we can go back into the data and pull some more out. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great, thank you.
Perfect. Well, let me, I guess, begin by saying thank you to everyone that was there at the forums last week. I thought they were really, really well executed. There was a really good positive energy in the room. I think that the first part of the very first forum was a little bit challenging, but once we moved past that and got into the discussion and got into the reactions to the models, things were really, really positive and really, really productive. So just quickly by the numbers, I think we had close to 400 people in attendance across the 2 nights. Nicholas, you may be able to correct me on that, but I think it's close to 400. We collected a total of 1,118 post-its, and most of which were directed toward feedback on the proposed models, as you know. We collected about 230 exit surveys. That means 230 people took the time to sit down and take a few minutes to sort of reflect on the evening as a whole and to give us their thoughts. And we had close to 100 people express interest in participating in the 2.0 team's upcoming focus groups. To me, these numbers alone are an incredible indicator of the level of investment that the community has in this process. I think it's astounding, and I think each of you should be commended for your role in bringing people out and keeping people focused on providing feedback. At the same time, I was also scratching my head at times. I'm sure you all have been too. I think we saw, quite frankly, a level of willingness to resort to, almost nastiness that we don't see in a lot of other districts. The one instance that really stuck out to me was there was a post-it note that was left that said, "I'm 10 years old and I don't want Ravinia to close." And right next to it, there was another post-it note that said, "I'm 46 years old and I want Ravinia to close, and I pay taxes." Smiley face. This is really interesting. Though, as I pointed out, I will say that the vast, vast majority of what we saw was really focused on providing direct and specific feedback. Overall, we saw a few things that stood out, and these were sort of
Hey
highlighted.
Josh, can I editorialize on the exit survey? Please. So we're going through and we're transcribing all the handwritten exit surveys now, and I'm just really impressed by the level of detail which Josh was to in the post-it notes. That's also, coming across in the exit surveys. People took these very seriously, and also, I think last time, Nicholas, how many exit surveys were collected across the 2 nights in March?
37.
37, and this time we collected 230. That alone, I think, speaks volumes.
And that was even with, we should also add, even with the technical challenges, people took the time and made the effort to try, that's awesome.
Yeah, there's something to be said occasionally for letting people put pen to paper. You have to be just a little bit more deliberate, right? Your writing becomes a little bit more permanent feeling, whether that's subconsciously or real or imagined. I think there's something valuable there. So a couple of
staff that were out in the hallway too said that folks who were together at the meeting were having honest to goodness, detailed conversations about the model too around the exit survey tables. So, some of that may have been, putting heads together in a way that's not necessarily moving the ball forward, but we also think that probably led to a lot of positive discussions as well.
Yep, and the staff should be commended for really, encouraging people to write down their thoughts as they're trying to get out the door. That can be a really tough challenge, but they did a great job. So a couple of things. First off, as much as I would like to tell you, there were 3 that models that stood out and the job was easy. There really was no definitive standout model, and there was a lot of parity across the models in terms of reactions. I can tell you that there was significant negative reaction to a couple of models, Model G and Model F. We noted a lot of.
Say that again.
G and F.
G and F?
G or C?
G and F.
G and F.
I heard B.
Let's start over.
G later.
So negative for what models?
G and F.
How about G?
G as in F.
Reaction.
G as in what?
G as in Godot.
Go. And is F is in Frank?
So F is the regional.
G and F.
And the primary reaction was that the older models were viewed as having too many buildings. The regional grade pairing also garnered a lot of feedback. And while there was some negative feedback regarding the number of transitions in a regional pairing model, there was also, at the same time, positive feedback for this concept. There was notable support for quote-unquote compromise plans that work to minimize both cost and disruption. We saw that Model C garnered the most overall feedback. I think there were 175 post-it notes for Model C.
C as in cat?
No, boy.
Yeah, if you guys could just give the.
Cat.
Yeah.
Yep, C as in cat.
And Corey's gonna go through each of the models real quick, just to give you another sort of snapshot in a little bit more depth. I'll offer one piece of sort of guidance on all this. On initial review, there aren't gigantic trends for one model or another. there is no one answer, and as you probably have already sort of guessed, the next steps are going to come down to political will, largely. When we talk about community engagement processes, we talk about two ways to run a process. We talk about consensus-based, and we talk about collaboration-based processes. We've known from very early on that we weren't going to reach full consensus on a single option. And at this point, it's very clear that we're running a collaborative process. When you're in that space, the only way that it's going to work is by developing as much trust as possible, and that only comes from being able to point back to a process that gave as much opportunity for information sharing and feedback as possible. And I think we are in that spot right now where we've done as much as we possibly could to share information, both in person, online, various formats, to get as much feedback as possible. And I just want us to note that the process has been really, really solid. And I wanted to commend 2.0 team on doing that. We're going to have a tough decision if we're going to make a decision. We're going to have to. But I want you to know that we've got a lot of data to work with. Even though there's not going to be a clear answer, there's a lot of information to work with. And we have the ability to point back on a process we can be proud of. With that, go ahead.
I don't want to be jumping ahead, but I want to just sort of, the implication of what you just said was important, that I want to explore for a moment with you. You're commenting on the process, I assume, in the context of other processes you observed. We're collaborative, we're in this collaborative process with the community, we're showing them the work all along. But we're also hearing that although there were a few things that stood out and got very powerful feedback, there were many things that they saw equally, or at least from the point of view of this forum, appeared equal in the type of feedback that we collected. Is that fair to say? If that's correct, does that mean that we then revert to other criteria which we have developed? And so how do you then proceed? I don't want to have a 40-minute conversation about this, but I'm just thinking, like, what's the immediate next sort of obvious step or options? Do you revert back, or do you then say, now we've kind of dived deep into the community feedback and they're telling us that, as far as we can tell, these several things appear to be equal? Does that mean that we then say, okay, we need to dial up some of the other criteria we've developed to help us separate? And do we feel that, how do we check and make sure that we're still keeping the community with us as we move forward on that? If that's the way that we have to, it sounds like we have to go. If there are 6 that didn't get obviously horrible feedback.
Yep, right. There's going to be some help in narrowing this down. I think the challenge is going to be when it comes to elevating our top 3. And my advice is that, number 1, we leverage the focus groups as an opportunity to continue asking why, not just in getting sort of the initial feedback, but in asking why people feel the way they do in the reactions they've had to certain models. And that's what the focus groups provide an opportunity to do. And that's why we suggested the timing that we did with them following these forums. So we'll leverage those to the full extent to empower this group with information. And number 2, we work to close the feedback loop, right? So during the focus groups and even after, as the committee is making its recommendation, one of the most important things you can do is say, this is what we heard, and this is why we made the decision we did. This community values X, Y, and Z, therefore we used X, Y, and Z as a lens when considering our decision. And I don't think that's going to mean that we're ignoring things. It means that you've been put in a position where you're given the opportunity to look at all the information that's put in front of you and to look at the priorities and values of the community that you are a part of and that you know so well, and that we've worked to engage this whole time, and use that as criteria for elevating your final decision. So between the focus groups, including that feedback loop and showing that we've listened and we're using what we've heard to make our final decision, I think we're putting ourselves in as best position as we can be.
That's just a quick question with regards to the selection process for focus group participants and the screening. Last time, and I apologize because I'm not on the subgroup that's participating in that process, but last time I feel like our focus groups, the participants really ran the gamut in terms of knowledge, priorities, kind of degree of involvement in the process. In terms of the applications that you've seen and kind of how we can make this as valuable a process as possible, what are you looking for in the screening at this stage for focus group participants?
Corey, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So, it would be great to have a diversity of knowledge in the room. That being said, if folks are completely unfamiliar with the process, it will be hard to follow because we're going to be digging into specific models that are based on, a knowledge base that's been previously established. I will say that I would imagine that we're going to trend toward having more knowledge in the room than less because as of right now, the folks who have signed up were predominantly coming from the forums. As Josh mentioned, we had about 100 people indicate interest for the focus groups during the forums. We've had about probably 10 to 20 more trickle in through other means. And those numbers will continue to grow because the ads are being placed this week and we're still early in the week. But for the most part, I would imagine that folks who are interested in digging in further into the models, who have already seen the models, will be the people who come out and give us their feedback.
On the focus groups?
The good part of that, the thing that I like about that is that it allows us to dig into why some of the things that were written into the post-its were written into the post-its. So as people give us their sort of top level feedback again, we can start to ask follow-up questions that will hopefully allow us to draw some trends as to why they're giving us the feedback that they're giving us.
Josh, we have a question.
You repeat it, thank you. Is everyone who volunteers included, or are we trying to scientifically sort of pick, screen, select representative samples for the focus groups?
There will be screening. So not everyone that signs up will be involved in focus groups. Is that adequate, or do you guys have anything to add to that? The question was, how are the groups going to be composed, I guess?
Right, so there is screening according to age, I'm just remembering what the screening sheet looks like. It's age, level of knowledge, involvement in the process previously, and what your relationship is to the district.
Okay.
We're looking for about 15 people per focus group, so that, currently there's 3 focus groups scheduled, so that's 45 people, so it'll be winnowed down from the list that we have.
Okay.
And there was a question regarding sort of high-level takeaways from the boards. Did you see any trends regarding project cost and the community response?
So you guys are going to go over the boards board by board, correct?
Then we should let you guys do
I'm gonna
that.
come on.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, Corey, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll give some high-level takeaways, model by model, and.
Hey Corey, you're a little bit fainter than Josh is. I'm not sure if that's something on my end or your end. You might have to shout in the phone. Sorry.
Oh, no, not a problem at all. I had to go outside because my son was screaming, but might be some wind in the background. So Model A, many participants felt that, I'm just going to go sort of model by model, stop me with any questions. Model A, many participants felt that this plan was too expensive, and some people commented on the separation between dual language and monolingual sections. In particular, commenters mentioned the potential for lack of diversity in some schools and a lack of monolingual resources on the north end of the district. Many positive comments about this plan were paired with the belief that this would be challenging to pass in a referendum because of the expense. Model B, this plan overall was seen as having a pretty good distribution of students across the district, while others felt that this didn't provide much, quote, consistency throughout the community, but that wasn't, the definition of consistency really didn't come through in the notes. That might be something that we want to dig in on the focus groups. Opinions were mixed about the 5-8 middle school concept. Some people felt strongly that 5th grade is a good time to transition to middle school, while others felt strongly that the students aren't ready for middle school at that age. And regardless of position, opinions were pretty strongly for or against that idea. Diversity was key to this concept, particularly with regard to dual language and monolingual sections being concentrated in different schools. Model C, as Josh mentioned, Model C garnered the most feedback out of the models. Opinions were either strongly in favor of the plan or strongly against. There really was no sort of middling position for this model. Many participants expressed strong favor for the plan, mentioning that it provided an equitable distribution across the district. Additionally, many positive comments alluded to the need for aggressive change via reconfiguration to provide the district with a strong future. Efficiency across the buildings was a key theme for people who expressed strong favor for the plan. Commenters who liked the plan also mentioned that they did not believe that it would pass a referendum because of the amount of change. Participants who did not like this plan mentioned that it was too much change for the district and expressed that the resulting school sizes would be too large. And additionally, some commenters expressed a dislike for the single middle school concept. Participants who expressed favor for Model D.
Wait, I have a quick question about. Hey Corey, real quick.
Yeah, sure.
So you,
Go for it.
on Model C, you mentioned there was a strong for or a strong against. Was there more strong for or more strong against? Was that did that come out clear?
I have to go through and count up. I have to go through and count up the numbers, but it was pretty equal.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
From just based on my judgment. And I did look for that trend when I was reading it. So Model D, the folks who liked this plan liked regional pairing. The folks who didn't like this plan didn't like regional pairing. So commenters expressed interest in the educational opportunities that would provide different age groups, the regional pairing and the developmental focus for the grade pairing. And some commenters liked that there would be a mixture of dual language and monolingual sections at the various schools. Participants who disliked this model overwhelmingly flagged the number of transitions as their reason. Model E, opinions on this plan were...
Hang on one second.
Just a moment.
What's that?
Just a question about the grade pairing on Model D.
Sure.
You've mentioned 3 so far that were, I felt from your comments, sounded like they were polarizing. B, C, and now D as well. So can you characterize how polarized is the feedback on D compared to the other 2? My one question I have is what assumptions do they make, and have we provided enough information about the pros or cons of regional pairs, other than people just being able to make the physical connection that there's not going to be an additional transition? And some people, I feel like people are they interpolating too much of kind of their own bias or assumption about what that means? Are they making it from the comments? Does it sound like they know what they're reacting to?
I would say that, yeah. No, that's a really good question. I would say that if you want to characterize it as polarizing, that Model C is probably the most polarizing because there was sort of equally strong for and equally strong against. And it would be probably incumbent to educate a little bit more on what regional pairing would mean for the district. The fact that transitions were cited as being the number one reason against it was so overwhelming, to the extent that you're able to talk about transitions and talk about what that means for students, I think that could be a helpful educational piece.
So, sorry, you were saying Model C was the most polarizing?
Yes.
But Model D is the one.
Yeah, polarizing in terms of strength. Yeah, Model C in terms of strength of opinion. Oh, I'm sorry. It's Model D. I'm sorry, Model D.
Okay,
people,
so
Can you say
people
dog
felt
cats?
like,
Because I'm
Yeah, can you say D's
people
and dogs?
who really like Model D, I'm sorry. D
So
is
the dog model,
really either likes the regional pairing because of developmental purposes that it would provide, or if people who dislike that model overwhelmingly flag those number of transitions as being the reason. So if you can dig into transitions, that would, I think, be a helpful educational point.
And is there a way to frame, I mean, I don't know if you were able to discern this from the feedback, but I wonder if you all could help us to figure out a way to hone in on this in the focus groups. Did the feedback on dog reflect an understanding that while the kids were changing buildings, they were moving with their cohort? Because I feel like that's a level of nuance that may or may not have come across in the boards.
you're reading too much into it.
changing building is changing building.
So that wasn't mentioned,
Finding where the gym is.
that I can recall in
I got
many
a lot
folks
of
know this
questions
at all.
about that.
So that is something that could be helpful to drill in on. But
Okay.
I agree that that's probably something to talk about in the focus groups.
Do we have a fact sheet on that? On how many other districts have regional pairs?
Actually, if I might, I'd like to make the point about some of the comments. Virtually all of them talked at least a little bit about the concept of dual language academies versus not. I have a friend who came literally both nights because she was really concerned that the dual language academies was a way of segregating people away from the rest of the group. And after spending literally the 2 nights talking to a bunch of folks, a lot who are dual language parents, came away saying, cool, this is great, people want it, it works, da-da-da-da-da-da. I think that there may be a theme that there are people who might not be as in favor of a plan that has dual language academies because they have this social issue in their heads. So perhaps I'm not sure I had it in the focus groups because my friend who's pretty knowledgeable about schools basically spent 4 hours talking about this before she was able to figure it out.
Yeah.
So let's let Link get through all the models before we start commenting. But sorry to sit you down, Rick. Corey, go ahead and continue.
Model elephant, are you gonna get to elephant now?
Model elephant. Opinions on this plan were pretty mixed. There wasn't a strong opinion group. People who liked E cited that the plan was less disruptive than other models, the cost isn't too high. And many commenters also mentioned that it was a good compromise plan. I would put compromise in quotes, that was their word. Commenters who dislike the plan mentioned that the balance in number of buildings favors the south side of the district, and some folks also mentioned that there wasn't enough diversity across the district and that Northwood is left with too few monolingual sections. And as we get into these later models, you'll notice that the sort of flow of dual language into Northwood is a common theme. The concern being that, you know, with a lot of dual language sections at Northwood, that the monolingual students are sort of left in the dust. And that's one comment that I read. But you know, that sort of idea is common throughout. So Model F garnered many negative comments about there being too many buildings. The idea that there needs to be a greater balance between dual language and monolingual sections at Northwood again. Some commenters mentioned that the grade level splits at Braeside and Ravinia would generate, in their words, unequitable programming. While others mentioned that the grade level splits might be a good use of the space and smaller facilities if left open. Some commenters mentioned that Model F might be a good compromise plan. That either and among those, either the cost was still high for keeping most buildings open, or the district wouldn't save enough money from consolidation. That was an impression. Obviously, the operating costs weren't necessarily queued up for them, but you know, I'll talk about operating costs in a few minutes. But you know, that sort of idea was running through in the keeping too many buildings open models, where folks felt like the operating cost savings likely wouldn't justify the cost. Model G garnered the most negative feedback out of all models. Feedback overwhelmingly emphasizes this plan keeps too many buildings open and that there are too few sections per school. Some folks emphasize that this plan is not enough change for the district, and particularly that it's too expensive for just keeping close to status quo. And some comments also mentioned that there are too few monolingual sections at Northwood, and/or that Wayne Thomas appears to be isolated as the monolingual group that flows into Northwood. A few participants expressed approval for this plan, citing the emphasis on the neighborhood schools and keeping specific schools open that would otherwise be closed, for example, Ravinia. Finally, with Model H, the positive comments regarding Model H mentioned that this is a sensible and sustainable plan at a lower cost compared to other plans, and the balance of the comments for Model H did trend negative, with some folks citing the similarities between this plan and of course BDR3 and the inbound dual language versus monolingual sections at Northwood. Again, the isolation and fewer sections at Wayne Commons. A few commenters also mentioned that this plan included too many buildings with too few sections. Many of the comments regarding Ravinia were concentrated on this plan, perhaps because of the plan's similarities to BDR3, but that's just an idea.
When you say comments on
Two
review,
additional pieces of feedback from the process and the financial board. Many of the additional comments that came in were pretty mixed, with some expressing.
Wait, just a moment, Corey, just a moment. There was a question.
School or plan.
Hey, Corey? Yeah, so, John, you had a
Yeah.
question?
were the comments about Ravinia to save it, or?
Were the comments about Ravinia focused on saving it, or,
I think honestly that it came to a little bit of a turf war, to be honest, on this board, where it was save Ravinia or, not necessarily this board, but across the board, we saw this, where, there was save Ravinia and then next to it a comment about closing Ravinia. So it's a polarizing issue.
gotcha.
So if we're torn between two
Can I
things.
just finish up the process and find
Yeah, go ahead.
really quick? So a lot of the additional comments that came in, they were pretty mixed. Like I said, they either preferred a particular plan or school, or others mentioning a preferred approach, for example, a middle school concept, a single middle school concept. Many participants did mention that they'd like to see more information regarding operating costs and long-term savings for each of the plans in order to weigh in more concretely. And some comments also mentioned the desire to see boundaries before deciding to support a specific plan.
Could I ask a quick question?
I think that about sums it up.
Question. Hi, Northwood, the comments about Northwood were, and too small of a monolingual student population in Northwood. That, I don't know, you must have mentioned it over 4 or 5 plans. Did
Yep.
B, which has the most, I think you mentioned it for B as well, as for the majority of them that have 2 sections or 3. But when B probably has more sections, I don't know actually the status now, but we don't have any other model with more monolingual students, or that ratio. I guess it's about 40-60. So my question is, what were the comments on Northwood in B? I think you touched on it, but I'd like to hear it again. B as in boy.
Sure. Let me scroll up to that really quick.
And everyone does have the comments.
And Helen, on Model B, Northwood is an elementary school. Is that what you're looking at?
Yes, but it
Okay.
had those comments as well.
Yeah. So I don't believe I mentioned Northwood as part of Model B. What I will say is that there.
Oh, I'm
there may
sorry, you know what? I did
negativity.
mistake. I misspoke. It was Model A. Sorry. Even though of the expense, it had,
Oh, the new
it was A. Well, it could be, doesn't have to be new.
So
Remember that.
A, D, and E all have more monolingual at Northwood than the others.
Right.
Right, so do the
Right.
comments differentiate between saying 4 sections or 2 sections? That's what I'm wondering.
Of course, it's something we can ask at the focus group.
Or should that be in the focus
Yeah,
group?
I'd say that that's something that we could dig in on the focus group. I didn't see a significant reaction to either. I will say that, it's possible that the yellow stuck out more to people, and that sort of drove some of those comments, so they might not have seen the 60-40 split when they're looking at the board. But overall, I didn't really see a differentiation between a few more monolingual sections.
Well, you
And
said
that's
toward
important.
the end, those comments increased as you got deeper into the ones with fewer monolingual.
That's for sure.
Yeah, they
That's what he said.
increased. So in
Yeah.
that respect, I would say that the strength of the comments increased, if that makes sense. I wouldn't say that they got more strongly against, but I would say that you saw a greater volume of comments.
I just have a question or a comment on D. Did you see, I don't know, can hear me, but did you see, when they talked about transition from school to school, it's the grade model, it's the one with the grade, with the regional centers. The comment that I heard the most wasn't going from a K2 to a 3-5, but the split of Red Oak, that some kids were gonna go to Northwood, and the dual language would go to Northwood, and the monolingual would go to Edgewood. And that was the most negative comment. Did that come out on the comments that you saw?
Yes.
You can have these.
I don't
I
think.
don't recall off the top, but it is something that I can look into and talk about on Thursday.
Yeah, Lori, I looked through the comments today, and that did come up. I think that in general, there's still a lot of sort of confusion or misunderstanding surrounding the dual language program, both at the elementary and the middle school level. I think a lot of the comments sort of play out some of the things that we know are sort of misunderstood. When they're talking about splitting up that school, they talk about it as if the kids spend the whole day together rather than that they are two programs side by side and that they have recess and lunch and they have social opportunities, but it's not the same as splitting a school. So I think there's still some confusion and we need to work on how we want to approach some of those topics as we
I agree,
move
because they were
forward.
looking at it from a social issue. That, well, they have these kids and now they're gonna take the dual language kids and ship them off far away.
Which is exactly how things are right now.
That's right, it is.
And I think
when was-
another thing, I
Yes.
think another thing that really needs to be teased out in the focus groups with regards to this one, because I was at that station as well, is that there were a couple of people who were looking at the schools that house 4 sections of dual and 4 sections of mono, saying it's such a huge school, when in point of fact, those are schools exactly in line. I mean, Oak Terrace is the size that Oak Terrace is right now, except instead of being a K-5 school, it's, I don't even remember which one, it's
K2.
It's K2.
Right.
And so it's actually in line with the CFAC recommendations for school size,
Yeah.
but they're just configured differently.
There's confusion about the number of kids K-5 versus the number of kids if you just slice the same thing the other direction. The school still holds the same number of kids.
There's a bunch of
Just
comments. I'm going to say, I don't know if it's confusion is versus saying, I don't want my grade size to be 150, I like my grade size of 25. So I guess I interpret that to say school size and grade size, I feel, are different flavors of the same issue.
I think we need to get some clarity.
I agree with Ron.
Yeah, dig a little deeper.
There's a bunch of comments questioning whether or not dual language has to stay together all the way through 8. And I don't know if that's, we've sort of using that, but I don't know that necessarily, I mean, maybe that's a school board thing at some point to figure out whether or not that has to happen.
That is so interesting.
But there's a lot of comments asking whether or not that's really such a good thing.
And again, I think there is, and maybe confusion's not the right word, but there's some question about how the program is structured in this district. And one of the challenges for us is that we don't actually know the future path because we have these new people coming into the cabinet that will also work on those topics. So I think that there is some
Well, in
a
reality,
challenge
is
there.
early on in this process, we always focus on the middle school not having 2 middle schools or more than one middle school with a dual language component.
The information that we,
We self-selected it, but maybe that's something we should.
The information that we've been working with is that it's a real staffing challenge to operate dual at both middle schools.
Costs a lot more money.
That's just a
weren't you
given.
asking
It's
a
just
different
literally
question?
challenging to find the instructors. Like, it's hard to get the staff.
I think, there's a case to be made both educationally and operationally for keeping it to 1. But I also think that, we even said in the introductory comments, I tortured myself and watched myself on video last night. I made a point of saying we're not talking about dual in more than 1 middle school, but this is preliminary. And if we want to revisit that, or if the board makes a decision to revisit that, rethinking program placement and feeder patterns doesn't upend a configuration, and I think it's really important for us to know that and be okay with it, and it's really important for us to let the community know that, and that all of this will go through that process.
I mean, I feel that of the topics that generated a lot of comments where you kind of wonder, like, how much information people have, or do they realize that this is actually much closer to what we have today than they might understand?
Well, but what we have today is interesting, but we're making massive changes across the district in a bunch of ways, right? So what we have today is necessarily, at least from my perspective, good, bad, what we have today is what we have today, it's a data point.
Right.
What we want for the future for the kids is really more important, right? So
there are a lot of constraints with how that population can move around, so you can't just sort of have 2 sections in 5 different elementary schools.
You have to be cognizant of.
But what we're talking about is whether or not it goes into 1 middle school or 2 middle schools.
I got it, but so I think what a lot of people are reacting to is like, some people assume this is how it is now, but many people I think assume this is a strategy and you're deciding to put everybody here without realizing that's actually just how it is now.
That's for sure.
So I
People
felt
who've been
like
out
from
of
a-
the district,
from an
for
educational
sure, don't know.
Perspective,
But it's 7 sections.
it's kind of a little bit of kryptonite because people had I heard at least people vocalize some strong reactions. Somebody said something like, why are we contorting ourselves around this program, essentially? Things like, we've all heard these kinds of comments.
Right.
But I don't think people understand some of the drivers behind, some of these constraints. But, so we have to communicate enough information that people have clarity, but also make it clear that that's not part of what we're charged with doing, and we should also be clear, is there flexibility for dual language movement within what we're proposing?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. I think somebody made this comment or made the point during the introduction, during the I don't remember who was, of course I couldn't hear it the first night, but but I think that we need to drive in the point that we're not making curriculum decisions, we're making building decisions, and that these building decisions are flexible enough that if today there are 3 dual language sections in a building, that doesn't mean that tomorrow there can't be 4. And that we're building the buildings to be flexible in that
Or
way.
they could be in the whole other building.
Right, exactly.
The problem with that, frankly, though, is when you have dual language building, or building that is majority dual language, and you say, well, we can be flexible and not make it dual language, then you're talking about drastically changing feeder patterns and boundaries, which I think we try to avoid that concept as much as possible. Again, the board can make that decision, but if you have a predominantly dual language school in a plan, like if it's Red Oak, for example, if it's Red Oak, and you say, well, we're going to make that monolingual, well, where are those kids coming from?
Because the dual language kids are coming from all over the country.
Agreed, but if you take a dual language program that's Red Oak, for example, and you say, well, we can just change that around and do something different, then you still have to find the population to fill that building with monolingual.
And they're already somewhere else.
So it does affect where everything falls.
So we're not
We
saying-
can't just say, we're just making facility decisions and the chips will fall where they may. We're making these recommendations based on where the monolingual students are and where some of or half of the dual language students are, and where the other half can go to.
Yeah, and it does impact our cohort size, which is something that we've really tried to work on with, the current situation at Red Oak and Sherwood as well, where the cohorts are very small and there's an interest in trying to consolidate those populations, and that's where,
But I just want to ask one question. Is it true, though, so Darren, I totally get what you're saying. I guess looking at these concepts, though, is there any one of them, and no one's talking about doing this and then changing it, it's more about what does the final product look like in terms of where dual sits. But is any of these things...
That was a comment, it's not negative, I'm just saying it was a comment.
No, I know.
That we could just, these are the buildings that we want to identify, and then the board will decide. We're kind of deciding, we're recommending which buildings make the most sense. We can't just say the board is going to, they can, but these buildings are selected for specific reasons.
But they could also change the priority of those reasons.
Absolutely, no,
So
absolutely. But it's not as plain vanilla as it is.
Yeah.
As it could be made
It's
out
not
of.
without
Very
friction.
specific.
So guys, I'm just gonna, I'm sorry to shut things down. Just before we get too far, is there anything we need from Link? Because they're around the country in St. Louis and DC on phones.
Which models do we use?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, do we have any other questions before we kind of divulge?
I don't know if part of the write-up too is going to be, just based off of this conversation, just trying to eyeball it, what percentage of the Post-it notes say something about monolingual and duolingual? I mean, are we talking about more than 50%? And granted, the people that came, I think we're trending towards people that have school, kids in the district that are monolingual students or dual language students. But I mean, again, we just said, we're not making those decisions, but if everybody's coming in asking questions, or 50% of the respondents of the Post-it notes say monolingual or duolingual somewhere in there, I mean, we at some point have to consider that. So I'm just curious, like, that was my gut, was like 50% just looking on here, but I don't know if that's be part of the write-up.
So Josh and Corey.
It is a good number. Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. It is a good number. When we do our word cloud, we can look at that and see if there's any way that we can calculate a percentage.
Yeah, you'll need mono, dual, DL, ML.
Yeah.
Well, and another thing that came up as part of that is that we don't have, so when we're looking at this feedback, we're looking for threads, we're looking for themes, but we're not treating this as scientific data because we don't know who these people are. So we don't know that somebody didn't put 3 Post-its exactly the same on one board, or we don't know that it's not a 10-year-old that was walking around. We don't know.
That's okay, because that's not the feedback that we were trying to get.
Right.
Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify kind of that, yeah, for everybody, that we're looking for themes and patterns, but we're not treating this as scientific data the way like a survey would be treated.
One interesting mono-dual point that someone brought up to me at Model C was that a couple people pointed out the possibility of taking the 4 Oak Terrace dual language, heads, and if you swap them out with the 4 blue Northwood heads, that you would have a dual language academy. If you switch the yellow and the blues, do you guys see what I'm talking about on Model C?
Well, then you just have to refer to the language academy.
Right. I think that a bunch of people brought that up when I was at that station, that they thought that people were seeming, I think it was people obviously who were interested in dual language academies.
So your point is that would be a 6-section dual language academy.
It would be a
and Oak Terrace would be
6-section dual
monolingual,
language
which is
academy, and then
completely
the 4
opposite of this.
blue heads would go to Oak Terrace. I don't know how else to say it other than blue heads. That was just a mono dual thing that kept coming up, just something.
I think we want to walk through some of those things, like the themes that we all heard at our stations, but I think Nicholas would like to wrap things up with links so they
I
can go.
have one link comment. So this is just something that we can park and look at the next week, but I said at the finance table, and so I had like 20 consecutive conversations about the operating cash flow savings of each of these programs. And so I know that like I've seen the models that we all have, and they're really, they're good for like spitballing the numbers, but people are saying, why, you gotta show me how much money I'm gonna save by spending $100 million on the district. And so I would like us to be able to answer that question with something at focus group time.
Yes.
And just saying the district is too busy to do any of the, or the district doesn't have the resources to price any of these with the staffing models, I think was an unfulfilling answer that I found. So I would like us to find a way to get something, just what would an 8-school model look like, staff-wise or something like that. Just something to do something to answer that question.
You can't get a staffing model by next week.
You can get a direction.
You can't get 8 staffing models by next week.
So you can't get that, so what's the next best answer that we can?
And I think that's
because
reasonable.
Saying no is people saying, I can't look at $100 million without knowing what the difference is.
I agree, and I actually think it's so encouraging that people are thinking about the long-range view, because I think historically there's been such a preoccupation and a very kind of myopic focus on the front-end cost and the tax impact, and it's more complex than that. So I would actually say that those 20 consecutive conversations are a really great indicator that people are tuned in and being more thoughtful about kind of what this means longer range.
But that doesn't answer the question.
Well, no, but we will. But now and link on the line, maybe.
We are going to answer that by the time we make the recommendation.
I mean, I have a comment, but if you want to get rid of the link.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, so.
Actually, sort of a link question.
Okay.
As we're going through, each of us is going through over the next couple of weeks, sort of picking out of these models our personal 3 or 4 favorites. Based on what you've seen with other districts and other communities, is there some sort of criteria we should use, sort of thinking we should have 1 or 2 compromisey type models that we should have as our favorites, and maybe 1 or 2 more visionary models? I mean, how should we select from, what are your suggestions for rubrics for selecting from here?
It's too early.
Corey, do you want to start this?
Or just starting the
I've got a couple
process?
thoughts. One is that, if you want to give the board a diverse array of decisions to make and allow that decision to land with the board is going to be able to sort of, is going to be able to deliberate those sort of long-range decisions and have the political will to, or sort of generate the political will, I hope, to make a decision as to how to move forward and give them those options. I think that's a good idea, that diverse array of options. That being said, if there's a specific recommendation for how to move forward that 2.0 wants to make, like a certain trend for what the change in the district needs to look like, then that is also something that, that the group would need to generate that sort of political will to have that opinion, if that makes sense, and put that best foot forward, that there's a clear recommendation to the board about what types of options that you want to see put forward. So it really depends on where you guys lie in that decision. I would say though that from a collaborative standpoint, a diverse array of options is certainly a good way to move forward in July, especially. I'll add one quick thing to that, since I got everyone's ear, and that is everything I said before about using the feedback that we've gotten to date to justify the decisions that we're making, but also this will come down to, is this a different option than the one we just saw previously, right? So use that lens as appropriate when making recommendations to the board. Are we seeing enough difference from what this community saw during their last decision-making process?
Would you also factor in the way in which things unfolded with BDR3, or are you talking about just what went to ballot?
I think just what went to ballot. I know that's reductionist, and that's probably hard to hear, but...
No, it's critical. It's critical, otherwise they don't think you listened.
I think it is important. I think it's actually super important to think of it as a process of reduction rather than a process of promotion, in the sense that it's not favorites, not to pick on you, Dan, because we all have our favorite things or everything that makes sense, but I think that ultimately it is the process of connecting all the dots all the breadcrumbs we've picked up along the way and saying, this is the reason why this one isn't making it, this is the reason why this one is what we are advancing for the board to explore, refine, get more feedback on,
Okay.
So
I'm sorry.
Oh, hey.
With 8 plans, I think it was inevitable that you wouldn't find a preponderance. I think it was inevitable. Now, by the time you go to a focus group, which is what, days from now, a week?
From tomorrow.
A week from tomorrow, are we going to be working with these 8 models, or are we able, are we able to kick a couple out?
I don't think the focus group is focusing on the models, it's focusing on concepts.
Well, I'm asking,
So
do you
that
use the
is
models?
a topic of discussion. Now, Link, they had kind of a recommendation for the focus groups, but that's also something that the committee has to talk about. Did you guys want to go over a couple different ideas you had about how the focus group should work, or can work?
Yeah, I can do that real quick. So in terms of format, we had a couple of ideas, but one that sort of rose to the top as, a potential preference. And that is, and we were making the assumption that 2.0 team was not going to eliminate anything between now and next week. So this is, with that assumption in mind, we would recommend having facilitated discussions on groups of models. So basically, we would organize 3 30-minute sort of mini discussions on each of the groups of models, similar to the groups that we had at the forums. So we'd have a discussion of 30 minutes on A, B, and C, then on D and E, then on F, G, and H. real simply put, the 2.0 team members would lead an objective review of each model, and then I would help to facilitate the conversation about those 2 or 3 models. That would allow us to do some direct compare and contrast. It would also allow us to do some values-based questions around some of these cross-cutting themes. We have the flexibility there. That would allow us to cover the full range. If, per se, you wanted to eliminate 1 or 2 from consideration and you justify that based on the fact that we just got overwhelmingly negative feedback, or you read negative feedback, pointed negative feedback about that 1 or that 2, those 2 models, we could eliminate them and simplify this a little bit further. I don't think that's absolutely necessary. I would suggest that we structure the conversation at least, so that we weren't doing 8 models and giving equal time to each and doing them one in succession from the next. I think that's a little too tedious, and they would bleed together. If you group them, it makes it a little bit easier, and you can still get a little bit of that, comparison in those sort of smaller groups.
So you
How
are,
does that sound, people?
sorry, so you were assuming that we wouldn't be making any decisions about not advancing certain models. Is that your recommendation, that we not make any decisions at this time?
I don't want to talk for them, but I don't think that's a recommendation. It was just the assumption of the work that we could get done between now and then.
Okay.
I also,
Right, it was also informed by the presumption that the exit survey data is going to provide some more detailed explanation that might be helpful to those deliberations. And if those are coming in less than a week before the focus group, whether or not you'd want to be eliminating anything a week before the focus group.
And I guess we can talk about this on Thursday. Then, once we have that work in front of us. Okay.
Are all 3 focus
and
groups going to be the same?
Go ahead.
what do you?
Not the same people, but the same, asking the same questions.
No, we're thinking it'd be 30 minutes. Was the focus group an hour and a half?
It's 2 hours.
Oh, they're 2 hours.
Wait, I thought I just heard
For 2 hours.
Link recommend that a focus group would be on A, B, and C, and the focus group would be on.
That's what I heard too.
No, he was-
Evidently, you're doing it all in one night, just in chunks.
Yeah.
He was saying 30 minutes
Got
per
it.
discussion per group.
And then,
30 minutes between up and down.
Why wouldn't you do it then? Why wouldn't you do it with each focus group being on one set of models?
Not enough sample.
We could approach it that way.
I think it would be more conversation.
2 hours on one set.
I think you could get really skewed conversations.
No, it's just 3 different
Because
makeup.
they're a different mix of people each time, so you'd have less skewed conversations to have the same.
That's right, and if you have one strong personality in one of those focus groups and they want to dominate the conversation on one particular model, you can have an outcome that you're not particularly pleased with.
all right, gentlemen. Well, the team has much to discuss, and I appreciate you guys coming on and updating us on everything. If we have any additional questions, we will get back to you, and we'll look forward to the link call tomorrow to talk more about the focus groups and the other projects we have rolling.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
I have a
Thank
comment.
you. Take care. Bye.
Is non-link here. I want to go back to, it is a building plan. The space is going to be used 60, 70, 80 years. 20 years ago, there was no dual language program, 25 years ago. But 25 years ago, Lincoln was an outdated, old school that was dangerous to manage, and it wasn't good when my children were there, like in the little preschool program. So we need, 25 years from now, there might not be a dual language. We've got to make sure that our space planning remains flexible, because education changes. And the longer I've been in education, which is years, I've seen trends come and trends go. But you want a building and buildings that function for the district with flexibility. And so that would mean, whether it's spacing them so they can be used, updating them, having them, you know, with air conditioning and safety so they're not going to poison our children with asbestos or whatever. We need to make sure we focus there instead of getting so caught up with dual language and yellow heads versus blue heads.
Yeah, I think I think you're making a good point, because that's kind of what happened. For some people, that became a central focus, and they were derailed in their ability to respond to the concepts because they were so focused on something that looked off to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like we have to acknowledge, we have to find, and this is probably down the line, maybe it's the board needs to do it, but along the way, we have to find the right way to communicate that without letting it take over.
And the dual language is simply a use of space.
Right.
It is not what we are deciding.
Well, and
We are
the truth
deciding
is that
space.
the truth is that it looks like all of the other space and all of the other drawings. There's no difference when we get a drawing that shows what a dual program looks like. The
Right.
square footage is the same, the furniture is the same, and
Exactly.
and I think Ralph's exactly right. But we need to figure out how to get people not quite so locked in.
We have to own that, right? We show them these colors.
Right.
Right? We can say we shouldn't look at that.
Because we didn't have it 25 years ago, and we might not have it in 25 years, but
I'm
right
just saying,
now, we need to plan
right
for the
now
programs
we
that we have.
I understand, so,
Right
but let's
now,
just own it. We've communicated this information.
Right.
Right? We've made it an issue. It's in there.
I don't think we made it an
We
issue.
didn't make it an issue.
It always already was an issue.
For those who
Let me
chose to
say
see it as
it
an
a
issue.
different way. We put the information out there. When we ask people for feedback, it was using those things. We have to
Right.
take that into account.
Right.
We have to get the thing passed. These are people, they're gonna vote, they're not, would it be great if they would just vote on buildings and 30 years out? Yes. But we have this information out there now.
So
Right,
Ron,
but
putting
I'm
that forward.
saying we need to focus, our focus, on what is the best use of space. And we need to make sure that we're not doing everything just because of romance. Ravinia, I'm sorry, it just sort of fit in there. You know, political correctness, or the opposite side of political correctness, the prejudice.
Yeah.
We can't let that happen. We've got to make sure we're focusing on what spaces are going to work best for our district.
So I don't think you guys are saying different things. I
Right.
think what we're saying, Ron said, look, we poked the bear. We've got maps that say DL, we've got to acknowledge and then take the conversation forward in the direction it should go.
Right.
Not driving further down into the rationale and tying ourselves to that, but rather, I think what you're
Exactly.
saying, Ron, is kind of dig ourselves out of what may be a hole to some people and say, what are you guys doing? Now 2.0 and this issue are kind of connected to them.
I think I agree 100% with what you said, though. I think reducing the number of buildings, the community seems to be very into that in order to have sustainability. The biggest question facing the community, I think, is which schools do you close and how much do you want to spend, and to make the buildings as flexible
Right.
as they can and the right number of square feet. And it's going to be adjusted over a long period of time by the administration.
Agreed. You're frankly talking about the lack of boundary changes we've had in this community for 30 years. That's all it is. It's boundaries. Because we're not saying a dual language school is built differently or the rooms are configured differently. It just so happens that because there's a dual language population near Oak Terrace that is required to have a dual language program at that school, however we want to define that program, that's why we're planning for it now. In 10 years from now, that may not be the case. All you have to do is change some of the tilde marks off the wall, and then you have a non-dual language.
Isn't that the job of the administration?
That's what I'm
Figure out,
saying.
though?
That's absolutely what I'm saying.
But this whole presentation is our opinion about change.
No, it's our opinion of what we have right now and how the global assumption for the community for the next 40 years can work today. We have not talked about how this program could work in the future when the dual language program transitions from one dual language to two different dual languages.
It was an illustration that it works, it's not a recommendation. That's where we didn't communicate adequately, I think. We can learn from that. We didn't communicate adequately. This isn't the recommendation where we think all this stuff should happen. We're just showing, hey, look, we thought about everyone physically that needs to be in these buildings, and this is how it can work.
Today.
So we need to dig ourselves out of that. But can we get back to, or not back to, but can we pivot to the focus group themes kind of in addition to?
Sorry, Megan was on the phone and I hung up on her. So gotta get her back.
Man. Yes, I think we need to get back to the themes and towards that goal. One of the things that we had talked about doing, I just want to check in, it's 8:20. If we can very briefly, so we heard Link's kind of overview. I think it would be very beneficial. I don't know about the rest of you, but I couldn't move from the board I was next to for 2 nights because there was such a steady stream of people. And I think it would be really beneficial if we could go around just very briefly, maybe station by station, not board by board, and hear kind of if there was anything that didn't just get covered that you all think we need to take with us as we're doing the work in preparation for focus groups. So is that reasonable? Yeah.
Maybe you'd see the comment about their experience on.
You want to start with hotel?
Human interaction.
And I want to hear from finance and process too.
Yeah.
All right, I can start with, I think everybody knows that, well, the too expensive. But for B, the biggest thing that I heard was about at Edgewood, the misconception or misunderstanding about how the Blue Head people are grouped 5 through 8, whereas Indian Trail and Elm Place, they're grouped 5, 6, and 7, 8. And they felt like it was not equal throughout the district. And then I spoke with Dawn, and Dawn was saying that there's, in some of the plans that they were talking about, that there may be 5, 6, 7, 8 on different floors at Edgewood, or perhaps maybe different entrances or things. So there's ways to make it an equal experience throughout the district, even at Edgewood being in one physical building. So that was just something that I heard a lot. I know, Helen, you were there night 2, right?
So we'll split this because we kind of did a switch.
Yeah, because I was there night 1, you were there night 2.
Right. No, we were both there. Oh, right, we switched our stations.
Yeah, I was on night 2.
Right, on the second night. So people really lingered at A, and of course.
She wanted you to weigh in on B, because she went to B.
Yeah,
we can go back to A.
A, I just felt like people kept saying it was too
Well, I can speak to A if Helen can too.
So I did A, B, C. Did you do your A, B, C?
I only did B and C. I was at A for like a hot
All right, so.
Stop, let's
Yeah.
talk about A and finish A, then talk about.
Okay, we haven't started A because Jory started with
No, I
B.
understand.
Sorry.
All right.
It's completely my fault for skipping letter
But if you're switching.
Back to A. Everyone
If
rewind.
you're switching with me, let me just cover.
Okay.
What it is, because then who else would be talking about
Okay, back to A. Everyone start at A. Go.
Okay. People really lingered on it. This is, I think, by this.
What does that mean, lingered on it?
They would not
Lingered to what?
leave there. They stayed and stayed and stayed.
Because it was the first
And they
one?
asked, they were worried, they were trying to figure out where the new middle school, the new elementary school would go.
Right.
That's the most important thing I want to say. To move forward with this, it might be hard if you don't come up with a recommendation that it be at Lincoln or Ravinia. I think leaving it nebulous like this is a disadvantage to the plan. That's one feedback I'd
No,
like
I
to
don't
give.
know whether we were gonna buy the land where Kennedy School used to be for this new school. They were bringing that up too.
Yeah, man, we talked.
Okay, but, I don't really get that, but, okay, but, and then on, the other thing about A is you tried to stress that things were modular, and we should try and get what they liked and didn't like about a plan. And as they were, having a little sticker shot from, so they wanted to know where that, I tell you, they'd like this plan otherwise, where that new elementary school would be. And the other thing, of course, the money was tough, but I kept saying, it's modular, we have renovated Northwoods too. And so I want the whole group to realize that if we want to move
You mean
with.
because of the two
Having 2 new
redone
builds
buildings in
on a
one
single.
Of course, and then Don could weigh in on this. I don't remember how much this plan, I was trying to figure out, I was running around trying to figure out if we had a rebuilt with a real number for Northwood. In other words, a Northwood that looks like this, it's on the site as it is. It's got the sections of this plan, but it's not a brand new school. And then I think you could look at A again, and that's why I was asking what we could do by the time we went to focus group, because I think if people knew where this, but the feedback I got was if people knew where the new elementary school in the east was, and of course that takes a lot of friction away.
So what you're saying
And we could bring down the number with a renovated Northwood. I didn't hear people clamoring for a new Northwood. That's what I want to say. They were worried about the cost.
Well,
And I
and
don't
we
know
had
the
asked
answer.
about that going into this, that we knew we had a new middle school price, and we knew we had working with what we had connected with Wayne Thomas price, but we didn't have that middle lane. We did talk about that going into this, and we
that's
knew we
what I
didn't
want to
have
bring
that middle
forward.
lane,
I
so that's
think-
something we may want to develop.
I want to say that this plan, for 2 nights there, has a lot of potential with that. And then
Not for.
How do we explain for the fact that the new elementary school, like, did anyone come in comments, let's put it this way, about how the new elementary school cannot fit all of the
Yes,
students?
so I'll lay it-
we
so
told
I was
everyone,
at-
like she said,
Yeah.
we told everyone it was going to hold 2/3 of the population that go to school.
And when people were for that?
They were, no, so I was at A the second night, and there was a lot of concern about boundaries. When they realized that the one elementary school would only hold 2/3 of the population, then they wanted to know where it was and which third it was.
So I would just like to leave
So there
this
was a
thought
lot of,
with you.
it
that 2/3
immediately
is
went into a
2/3.
boundaries conversation. In
2/3 is more
particular,
than 50% girls.
in particular, the Lincoln families were very concerned that they didn't see where they fit into this. So, when you talk about it only housing 2/3, I mean, in this plan, we do eliminate 3 elementary school buildings that we currently have. We eliminate, 2 of the 3 in the south, just building-wise, and then the one in the north. Even though we're combining 2 of those 3, when people look at it, they understand that there will only be 1 building there, and there are 3 student populations. So there was a lot of concern about how the boundaries
That
would
wasn't
work
my feedback.
relative to a new building.
That was not my feedback, I'd like to say.
Okay.
Clearly, it was not mine. People knew it would be 2/3, but they inferred that part of the north would go to Indian Trail. And meanwhile, 2/3 is 2/3.
But if you already have the north coming down to Indian Trail, then.
So where are they going then?
Right, thank you. Yeah, that's
No,
what the
I
Lincoln
mean,
families were asking.
But they are.
We don't
going
have an
somewhere.
answer to it.
No, yes, you did. You put 19 sections of the school, so you
Yeah,
did.
there are 19 sections.
If I can pause for a second? We've gone 10 minutes,
Yes,
we haven't
but
gotten past
you
eight.
want to,
Right.
all right, but that's
Neither
not
has-
because I wasn't willing to say
We
my
need to spend
feedback.
5 minutes
I'd like to say what's the
on a
feedback.
section and move on. Just-
Should we go to model B?
Let's go to B.
Model Bobcat.
Sorry for jumping the gun and skipping A. I will tell you again what people said about B.
Yeah.
People wanted an equitable experience for middle school, and the drawings that we presented kind of confused them
Yes.
about how to make an equitable experience at Edgewood, and that's an easy fix. And Don and I talked about it, that if you had 5, 6 on one floor, you had 7 on another floor, if you did different entrances, then you have the same experience. That was the bottom line that I heard a lot of talk about.
And it helped when we put a second sticky on. We
Yeah.
put a sticky on, we took of the liberty of drawing another 8 heads and going 5, 6, 7.
So you were modifying on the fly. It's a good thing to link people.
You know what? People were walking by and they were not getting it.
So
There
the-
were thousands of Post-its in the room.
Okay.
But there is a point to make about this kind of feedback, which is, and not to pick on you, but
Right.
if people see it and come up with something different from what you intend, that communication you're describing may or may not be successful, right? So they may or may not agree that it's now equitable based on the kinds of fixes or the sort of education. And you also are buying yourself an educational project to
It was
overcome those
definitely-
low attention.
I'm not gonna
folks.
lie to you, it's the #1 reason that I specifically asked not to be at that station night too. I'm seriously,
And then maybe I
legitimately, I
That's
literally
telling.
asked not that.
I do want to
telling.
say also, there's a broader theme, and this came up earlier, not to jump the gun to dog, which is where I was, but when people are concerned about boundaries, particularly at the middle school level, I think they are so accustomed to having 3 very different kinds of facilities with different quality of facilities and different kinds of resources and learning environments and opportunities. So when all of a sudden the boundaries are thrown into question and they're like, but my child was supposed to go to this school and now they might go to that school, it's really hard for them to imagine that we're going to bring those sites and the education delivered at both of those sites and the opportunities into parity. And I think that's something we really need to figure out how to communicate, but also like draw out more like what is it that people are worried about when it comes to middle schools in the focus groups. So as a broader scope of inquiry, I think that's so important.
Yeah, and that is kind of what you were getting to, is that they had a question about how the Edgewood facility would work versus the Indian Trail place. And that's like, in Model A, there was a lot of interest in having, you know, that facility dominate that site to have the middle school. But again, they, like Ronnie was saying, it's difficult to picture what that looks like.
Right.
All right, so
Oh, I was just gonna say, I was at C the first night. I was gonna move on.
Charlie.
Yeah.
Okay. I was at C the first night. There was a lot of interest, a lot of questions.
Same, a lot.
And a real mix, like Link said. There were people who were very interested in it. There are people who really like the idea of having all the kids together. And then there are people who say it's too big. You know, why are we showing the middle school campus again? You can imagine that there's the same sort of conversations. And kind of trying to discuss what the differences are, what we wanted to tease out was whether or not changing the location and changing from 5-8 to 6-8 made a noticeable difference in their opinion of that concept. So I think that we were able to get some feedback on that. The chief concern with that one is that there wouldn't be physically enough space to have, 1,400 kids at that campus with the high school right next door. That there was a lot of concern of like, oh, there's gonna be a lot of people, there's gonna be a lot of traffic, there was a lot of concern about how that would work. I did not hear as much about the elementary school piece of that as it sounds like may have come through in the feedback.
I heard a lot of, the 2 biggest things I heard was, as I said, the people discussing that they wanted perhaps a dual language academy to move the Oak Terrace dual language up to Wayne Thomas, move the Wayne Thomas / Northwood monolingual down to Oak Terrace, just to create dual language academy, which is, you just move the 4 around. That was something I heard a lot about. But then in terms of the middle school campus, there were so many people who had, what Link said was right on. There's lots of positives, lots of negatives. People were so amped up and excited about it being in downtown, it's gonna revitalize the business district, but then the same conversation, someone else would be like, no, it's gonna be terrible for traffic. So it was like so many highs and so many lows
That's what he said,
that
it
it
was
was
polarizing.
very hard to follow the conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you got the suggestion about the dual in the north, because there were a lot of people who were very concerned about just the 2 little sections at Wayne Thomas. They're like, well, would that be in that building? Would that be in a different building? Would the buildings be connected? They were very concerned about how that would play out.
It seems to deliver some super headlines for a no campaign in terms of like congestion, traffic, location stuff.
Yeah.
True or not?
Yeah.
Well, I was at D both nights, and I would say that there was just a lot of positive excitement about having regional centers.
Yeah, I was with Lori as well.
Yeah, we were together, and I don't know if you heard that, but a lot of positive feedback on that. People liked it. I didn't hear too much about people upset that their kids would have to change schools one more time. They had to go.
I did.
Okay.
I did, but I have to
sent them all to
say.
you, and but you complained, just like go over there.
Yeah, I have to say that they were people who had kids in the school. And to a man. They were people who had children in the schools, and they said, oh, but I have to take Johnny to Grayside and Jimmy to Ravinia because Johnny's in 2nd grade and Jimmy's in 4th grade. So the only people that complained about it were people with kids in the school.
Well, and I think there were a lot of questions, and I really tried to pay attention at least as much to the questions as I did to the sort of declarative statements. And some of the big questions that I heard over and over again is, will you stagger schedules to mitigate challenges for families who have kids in different grades? I also heard a lot of questions about, what does this present by way of opportunity educationally? And so there were a lot of questions, I think. I heard a couple of people comment about the transitions. And again, I mean, I feel like so much of what I heard though was questions, because people really, and the other huge question that I heard over and over again is, what are some examples of districts that have done this in the area and have done it successfully? And everyone mentions Glencoe, but Glencoe, truly District 35 is 6 sections per grade, and they're all in the same cohort, K through 8, they move through 3 sites together. You cannot compare, it is a very homogeneous population, and I don't think it's a direct corollary. I think Glenview would be really a very beneficial district for us to, if we decide to pursue this, we really need to go deeper, and I think we'll need to, people will want to know about other districts in our area with comparable demography.
What did people say?
That was, they wanted to, that was a lot of the questions, is like, where has this worked? How has it worked? How long has it been done for?
Teachers from Glencoe who came back and said how much they loved teaching in a grade school, which was kind of interesting. And I know Glencoe is a different type of population, but it was kind of
Lincolnwood is also, that's the one I know, it's it's just one, it's 1 K through 2, 1 3 through 5, 1 6 through 8, so they're all, and on one campus now that I think
they're on the
about
Lincoln
it.
Hall campus in one big.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the big negative that I got was the splitting of Red Oak. They didn't understand, and that it's the way that it is now, that they were not happy with that the dual language students would go to Northwood and the monolingual students would go to Edgewood. There seemed to be a theme. And the other theme I heard was,
that the Red Oak kids didn't, the Red Oak dual didn't end up at Edgewood when they went to middle school.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then the other,
Are we still in?
D, just one more comment on D. People who don't like dual language academies like this because it was mixed up in four of the 6 elementary schools. E.
Echo.
So I got some feedback from this model. I got the same feedback at the last forum, and they were saying basically stress the mundane. So if you go with a grade center model, you got to stress, how do I get my kids to school if I have more than one kid? So just throwing it up.
So couldn't busing?
Wait, you're talking about D still.
We're back, we're still on D.
You're still on D. We all moved to E.
Oh, sorry.
Couldn't busing be the answer? Isn't
Busing would not be a
busing?
problem if you have kids
Pardon
going
me?
to different, busing
I can
would not
hear
be a
you.
problem if you have kids going to different
If
schools.
we willing to put them on a bus.
You stand outside with
Run a
them
bus
in the
and
morning
go.
and you stand outside waiting for them in the
It's
afternoon.
the same
And
number
the
of
bus
buses,
comes.
Yeah, it doesn't change. The busing would solve that problem.
That's what I'm saying, or a little more targeted, enriched busing, because that might be a sweet spot. I'm just saying.
Yeah, with a mini bar.
No, but the busing is not solved if you don't follow.
Explain to me, because
So the point on the busing is you could have a kid that qualifies for busing because that school is further away from your house, but the other kid does not. That's the problem. So then you have to take one kid to Ravinia and the other kid gets bused to Brightside or whatever the school.
Why
Well,
can't
then you
there
don't
just be a
have-
shuttle bus running between the two schools?
Well,
to drop
that's
kids
covered
off
by
at the same
four.
I'm just saying, if we could get a little more, no, I'm not saying what is now, I'm saying, as we develop this plan, if we could think about transportation support.
We will, but not this week.
No, I'm saying that is an improvement to the plan.
Right.
Push it
That's an
forward.
improvement for all plans. That's like
Okay.
a neutral.
Echo.
We need to move on from that.
Edward.
Echo.
Echo.
Elephant, echo.
So I was at E, and the biggest negative I got was really the only comment I got on this one, for almost everyone, is there's no monolingual north of Park Avenue.
And the other issue is, where do kids in Wayne Thomas go? And how far do they have to travel?
Right.
So
So
I don't
we
know.
skirted the issue that we're not here to talk about boundaries, but said the most obvious would be Indian Trail, but we just don't know.
And just piggybacking on that, so if you look at the number of dual language kids at Northwood and whether the monolingual kids would have the social opportunities that the kids at Edgewood would have, basically. I think that was the question.
But people did who liked academies, like the fact there are 2. I did have someone who said that the entire district should be dual language, but that was a whole other.
One comment I heard on E was the early childhood kids would be separated from the junior high kids, wouldn't they? Would there be a wall? I said, well, I couldn't promise a wall, but there would be separate entrances.
No,
No, it was not.
Depends on who gets to build the wall.
Actually, that's the same thing. No,
Who's paying for that?
Are we done with E?
I think is that it? Darren, any other big takeaways? Or
That was the
That was the
big
big
issue
thing.
on that one.
Okay.
Came up again and again.
To follow up on that, though, does that, one of the things that I heard a lot, and again, I attracted comments on this because the positions I've taken in the past have been DR3, so there's the caveat. There's a lot of concern about a north versus south war, if you will, in terms of where monolingual schools are. And if you keep Ravinia open and have no monolingual north of Vine, then there's zero chance that a referendum will pass.
You're editorializing now.
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Your
This
position.
is what I heard from people, but I probably attracted them.
But before going to that editorialized aspect, it's just a fact, there's no school north of Park Avenue. Not and there's other schools south of Park Avenue.
Okay.
Can I talk about Foxtrot?
Yes. Go for it.
So why did I get those comments on A?
We've moved on from there.
don't know.
No, about no monolingual also.
We
I
cannot
don't know.
speculate.
Perhaps you weren't attracted to
You
them.
didn't attract those people, Helen.
Maybe they were afraid to be
I was
right.
double checking.
Okay, yeah.
So Model F, I think you've already heard quite a bit. I think the strong comment around that was, the obvious strong comment about this one was we've got regional pairs in one neighborhood and not anywhere else. So Ravinia and Braeside regional pairs are the only ones. So a lot of people paused and looked puzzled at the map, at the feeder pattern, and were wrinkled enough, just failed to understand why you would do that. There were also comments about Wayne Thomas being the only sort of small north side monolingual school and being the only 2-section school, so that stood out to people. There was kind of a similar feedback about the dual language. Some people liked the fact that it was more concentrated, they saw, and others thought that same comment that it made no sense that it was kind of isolated there. And I think the fact that it was 9 buildings kind of bugged some people, that it was still so expensive, and it didn't really seem to have a lot of great advantages. I think the few kind of good comments that were sort of positive comments were people who were sort of looking at their own neighborhood and seeing it sort of looked similar to what they had now, and they felt comfortable with that.
Because you had 9 schools?
Right.
Right.
Any other efforts?
Consistent with what Ralph said.
Shall we move to Gonzo?
No, just asking any other efforts. Yeah.
Gold.
I'm sorry.
So, G, goof. Gorilla. No, this one, the feedback was very, very negative, so I'll go with goof. I got no positive feedback on this one. This was entirely too many schools. Where are the operational savings going to be? You know, for people who were interested in the sort of plans about sectioning and cohorts, this plan has way too many 2-section schools. That's keeping small schools open. What are you doing with Green Bay? This was viewed as a non-decision type plan. This was being indecisive and just keeping things open. I had nothing positive.
Okay. All right. Hotel.
For
Any other groups?
two things that I heard, or maybe 3 things, depending on how sidetracked we get. People asked from time to time about why nothing was said about like Edgewood changes. So I don't know if this is like a focus group question of like, do people recognize that Edgewood's capacity allows for the 10 sections? All F, G, and H all have 10 sections at Edgewood, and none of the other models do. like there's a lot of like, well, you know, oh, it says you gotta do this for Northwood, can we, you know, what do you have to do for Edgewood to accommodate this? And it didn't seem like there exists out there in the world that it actually has the floor plan that we need for these sections. So I don't know, like I said, if that needs to be up there or not. And then I just had people kind of talking, and this wasn't really age specific, people just, I don't know, I didn't have any like real big trends that haven't already been covered for age, but people asked like, which of these is supported by administration / educational views, like that, you know, like that value wasn't tagged to any of them, so people were kind of curious, like, which of these do you think is the most educationally strong plan? Which one gives the kids the best experience or whatever? And so, you know, I said we all, I mean, we talked a little bit about that with the rubric, but that kind of data wasn't out there for them to kind of see how they were tagged community versus education. So.
If I can ask that question across, nobody else has commented on it. Did anybody else hear that comment?
About the educational opportunities?
How does this correlate to education?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And
A, B, and C.
I got it a little bit, I got complaints
I got it
about
on
curriculum.
D,
Yeah.
especially with the regional centers.
I was at the informational table when that came.
I think it's encouraging, actually,
You know,
that we are hearing about
G&H, it came up a lot, and the answer was usually to point people over the other direction.
I heard a lot of
that's,
that.
I mean, that's what I ended up saying
Yeah.
for, you know, the people, I heard some G people from H people, and I was like, you know, these three, like we said, all represent very little change, so like, in terms of like education focus, it's more of, this is just, how can we chop out a building or two and then move on.
Well,
Is that
that's
better?
helpful though
Is
in
that
moving towards the focus groups. Is there anything else that anyone wants to say about?
I did have
Tony?
people ask me why at some of the models there were dual language 7 section, and some of the models there were dual language 6 section.
Right.
Yes.
That was a question I got, and
Bigger classes.
Well, and it was very noticeable. Yeah, it came up where I was a couple different times by parents of dual language kids at Oak Terrace. They noticed it right away and zeroed in on it, and well, why does this one have fewer? You're not allowing for what could happen down the road. And I think maybe because the A, B, and C had, you know, new construction and some of that, I got a lot more questions about what would happen down the road. You know, in terms of, oh, well, did you plan for a 10% growth or a 15% growth? And I said, go find John. But I don't know the answer to that. Do we, you know, what is our answer to, are we, in these plans, are we allowing for 10% growth or 15% growth? And I got that question, I think primarily, you know, because these were new buildings, they wanted to know what that would look like. And so the dual part came up too.
Referring to A.
In that whole group, because I was at A and C, so I got that question in both places. It first came up at C because when they were talking about the kids all being in that one area, you know, is there enough room? Does it allow for growth down the road?
Modest growth, we're gonna build a new square footage for unknown, we still handle the boundary changes as well. You know, to keep that balance a little longer, buy a few years, but the new buildings are gonna be the same amount of square footage or classrooms as we've been talking about, so.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, is there any finance themes or comments?
Well, I just had to comment following up to Brian's observation. I also got a lot of questions about the cost savings that would be generated. And of course, I didn't have the specific answers either. But it's actually very concerning to me and has implications for other parts of our process. I actually think the idea of asking how much the savings are going to be is fair, but the idea of trying to shoehorn that into a return on investment by comparing it to the upfront cost is actually ill-conceived. Because if you think about it, almost all of the expenditures are just the opposite of generating cost savings. They're the voluntary, you know, creation of added expense streams. For example, air conditioning is an upgrade that increases capital expenditure, maintenance costs, and electricity, and so on and so on. So the actual amount of the referendum that would be spent solving a consolidation problem to create cost savings is very small, the whole piece, and the return on investment would actually be extraordinarily high. So you can get cost savings without the building referendum. So I think that the implication is that we have a communication challenge still if people are clamoring for this answer of what's the return on investment. it shows that they are still not educated still about the idea that the buildings are in dire need of upgrades and improvements that have nothing to do with eliminating teaching staff. So when people ask the question, we might want to say, I don't think that's the right question to be asking.
So how
Because
do
you
you-
don't, you know,
How do you reframe that conversation, especially as we're moving into focus groups? Very specifically in the focus groups, but also more broadly in the community? Because if you are unsettled by the way that the conversation is being framed, how do you reframe it?
I don't really know the answer. I also say those people who asked, it was a consistent question that we got over and over, but it may not be, it may just be some, you know, there's ROI type peoples out there who want to understand
Well,
what's
people
true.
might want to understand that we've identified, we're getting a little editorializing here, so I apologize, but that we've identified full-day kindergarten, air conditioning, kind of things that are musts that we've identified and things that we need to do. So people should ask.
Right.
Even though some of these are not necessary, they're not a necessity, it's a want, and it's a want from an educational standpoint as well as the longevity of the buildings and the equipment. If we're going to spend all this money, are we going to be having the same problem again in 10 years? or
That's
5
the
years?
question they're
That's the
asking,
question they're
not the
asking.
return on investment, because you're not going to make up $150 million on theirs. You're going and you're setting them up for big disappointment. I think that was the first thing I kind of scoffed when I first heard the last, prior to the last referendum, a big push on that in the schools.
So if the shape of these curves are different over time, and I have no idea if I'm barking down a dead end road here, but if the shape of these curves are very different over time in terms of what the cash flows look like from each of these paths that you choose, is there a landmark analysis you can do? With 10 years out, what does it sort of do a snapshot in time? What does it look like, just so you have a reference point?
Well, we tried to do this, and I think Dan had some output which he provided for the group, which basically showed that the range wasn't that great. There were a few outliers, but most of them were sort of clustered around, and it's a very
But that comment is exactly what people want to hear.
Right, and I tried to point that out at the meeting, actually, which the 10 building plan's clearly an outlier, right, in terms of expense. The 5 building plan's clearly an outlier in terms of efficiency, but the rest.
So can we
is
make
sort
a
of-
graph that just shows the 10, the 8 models or whatever in that 10-year, at that, sort of the right now to the 10-year landmark or something like that? If that is a.
Well, I'm not sure what type of graph you want. I mean, so what Mark said, you can say fewer buildings are more efficient, but as you get, after you do the first middle school, first elementary school, the efficiency gains go down. And again, it depends on how you rebound during what types of savings you think you can get. And I would really hesitate to speculate, but I do think that the district needs to make a real, we need to talk to Chris. We need to see if we have the capacity to come up with some really good, good numbers that are reliable that we can present to the community. And I don't know if that's doable in your time frame, but certainly, as the board narrows things down or goes through, we need to show people that work.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the summer's schedule.
So it may just be part of it.
I was in the finance group too, and what I tried to do was to say that the operating savings would basically level out the cost to the various options. So a more expensive option might save more on operating. I tried to never suggest that sort of the main base of the renovations are there's going to be a direct return on investment. I think that's kind of the way to look at it, is it evens out the costs of the plans. It doesn't pay for the whole thing. The education benefits pay for it. That's what the big advantage is. And people seem to be very comfortable with that. But I think your point is excellent.
Well, I just don't know how to handle that in the focus group either, though, because, you have, again, this problem of people really have to understand that we need to improve the building.
Are we asking them to understand, though, can we say, for the purpose of this focus group, we'd like you to assume that the overall cumulative operating expense or whatever is essentially very similar.
Well, we should
to what the starting point is that we're presenting. Imagine that just projects over time, those differences are sustained.
That's fine.
So if Model A and Model H are different by $30 million in the price that we present here and the cost that we present here, can we just say, for the focus group, we say assume that difference is relatively sustained within the things where it said, so it doesn't become a question about everything.
Well, if Model H and another model are the same cost, and Model H has more buildings, then that's not.
So I picked a bad one.
That's not a truthful
to
statement.
use as the example, but
But
I'm saying to
I think
avoid
you're
it
right. I
being a
think you're right.
derailer,
You're
like
right,
something
generally.
simple to say, there's not a hidden like gotcha in here. There's a lot of complicated reasons why, but they're not that far apart.
There's only one model, and that's Darren's model, where you might have really, substantial savings, which might, make that model.
So C and H are kind of like the opposite.
Right.
It's 5 and 10 building.
That's the 5 school that may have, we started to explore that could have,
So it's related
Much more
to, because of the time frame, I'm just experimenting
Yeah, yeah.
with, so because it's related to the number of buildings primarily.
Right.
If you have an 8-building model where you invest and do some extensive renovation or new building up front, that will lower some of the operating costs over time. Because you're not gonna have to do as much maintenance on as many different decrepit things. Versus if you take those 8 buildings and you just kind of tune them up a little bit, but you don't do a lot of radical stuff, you're gonna keep spending money at a different rate on those things. So by the time you add it all up, those 8 building models will be relatively close to each other. Is that sort of what you're saying?
I think it's what you're trying to say, but it's a hard thing to just blanket statement, at what point you're tipping wrong.
But we gotta give people something, to the point where we keep
Well, and I
avoiding the
felt like
question.
people did understand that, because I was at, C the first night and A the second night, and, talked about that quite a bit, that those plans, A, B, and C, take you out further than, the ones that have less change. I mean, people seem to, I would say more people who were interested in that had young kids, that were maybe a little bit more invested in that long-term plan, who were like, oh, nodding, and yes, that sounds good, that it would take us further.
I think that the biggest challenge is going to be for the ones that aren't so distinct in terms of the cost up front and the long-range outlook financially. Because I think, one of the things that's interesting,
Challenge with respect to what, though? You said the biggest challenge is gonna be those things. Challenge with respect to what?
helping people figure out how to make a really informed evaluation of the model.
Well, that won't be the basis for the
To take
evaluation
that
on
to a
that
very,
model, they're
very
the same.
finite example, the cost of D and E, we said were the same, but they're $2 million different, and people couldn't let that go.
Are you serious?
So, yes.
You're obsessed with cost.
So that's my point. There's a complete obsession.
Yeah, I was thinking
with-
But I apologize, if I get us back to our mission at this point, because that's the decision process in September for the committee or the board. We need to wrap up, we're already at 9 o'clock.
I have 4 bullet points.
He's got 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, anyway,
You're only allowed 3.
Okay, I made the quorum, I get a bullet point. I think the first question on cash flow savings, the corollary, the other side of the coin is saying that if there are cash flow savings, what are we doing with it? So are we paying off a referendum early, or are we plowing it into more STEM or more differentiated learning, whatever? That was an open question, okay? Thing 1. Thing 2 is that I didn't interpret the questions on cash flow savings as people doing a net present value or IRR analysis. I think they're looking for a carrot, and I think they're looking to say, okay, it'll save me $2 million, it'll save me $3 million. I don't know that anyone has their HP calculator out there with cash flow streams trying to figure out the ROI in this. I just don't sense it was that specific. Third bullet point was there was a question about are these numbers the amount we're bonding? And so we had the answer to that, but that was a question that is still coming up. I see $127 million here. Is that the amount that we're bonding? There's the answer, but that was pretty continuous feedback. And then also, I just sort of got the sense that people didn't realize how much deferred maintenance there was. I spent a lot of time going to these charts that Mark prepared that showed this is how much we didn't spend in maintenance the last 4 years, and this is how much we're going to spend the next 4 years. So I think there's still we're still learning that by waiting for this process to happen, we've upped the amount we need to be spending on those companies.
And is it fair to say we're depleting that amount by every year we operate the 12 schools?
Depleting.
Yes?
You're getting close.
Well,
You're increasing that.
there's what you're looking for. So the payoff is that that's the answer to the question that's the most meaningful. We're spending from reserves because we have too many schools, And pretty soon it's gonna threaten curriculum. That's really, isn't that really the answer to what they're asking? Or you don't think so?
Sure.
That was the core question 9 years ago, or 8 years ago.
Pardon?
That was the question 8 years ago. We had this much in maintenance scheduled for the next period of time. Is there a better way to not put it in brick and mortars, or put it in the classroom?
I mean, again, I'm trying not to be jaded by being called out for one of the models being mine, but the fact of the matter is people are gonna want to know, is this solve the problem for 5 years, 10 years or more?
That's right. That's right.
That's all they wanna know.
That's right.
Process station, I'm sorry.
What's that?
I was going to the process station.
Please.
So I was at the process station on the first night, and I did get questions around, excuse me, so particular from the Lincoln parents around boundaries and feeder patterns, so there was some concern around that. Tried to address it. They were more, I shared with them why we didn't have the boundaries, and then sharing with them the process of when boundaries would be discussed by the board. Like the board needs some options before they can discuss boundaries. So that seemed to help a little bit. Some more questions around money. Why one person in particular was very vocal about we should just ask the government to pay for this for us. So I was like, okay.
Oh, I had him too.
I was like,
He's the
have
one
you
that
seen
wanted
it?
us to
Wealthiest district in the
put
city.
policemen with guns in the lobbies of each of the buildings instead of doing the work we're doing this summer.
Okay, great. Oh, well, I'm glad that was an equal opportunity commenter.
And he also told me we shouldn't air condition because he wanted his kids to breathe fresh air. And I said to him, sir, you are entitled to your opinion on fresh air, and I want my kids to go to a school where there are no guns, and I'm entitled to that. And then I
Are you guys gonna ask a question at the focus groups about boundaries?
How do we ask a question about boundaries?
I think the question is how willing are you to change boundaries? Should the goal be to maximize savings, equalize class sizes, or should the goal be minimum disruption?
So
How
can
are you
I
comfortable?
say, so the comments I got around boundaries, most people understand that new boundaries need to be drawn no matter what situation.
Right.
So that I feel like everybody understands that. What they were concerned, so what we tried to get them to think about, and I think this might be a way to tease that out, is it more important for you to be closer to your elementary school or your middle school? Because that could be a way to tease out
I think we've answered that question, right? Because they said elementary is more important, right?
That was early focus.
Some.
That was one.
Yeah.
But then I had people come through who were in kind of that same group, but they were worried about boundaries, and they said they were concerned about being sent north to a different middle school when they lived so close to the one that was by them, and they felt comfortable with their middle schoolers walking to school, so they would prefer to keep their middle school. Yeah, so I think it was all sort of tied up in that boundary concern. Yeah.
The boundary question I actually heard was about.
Yeah, it was a lot of
Lincoln people.
That's the
The boundary question I heard was about, will my daughter be separated from her best friend? And so it's a question of, does my elementary school footprint continue, get mapped to the same school?
And so some of the other themes I heard, we didn't get bar mitzvah Post-its, by the way. You guys saw them.
So, I've been taking notes about things.
Rockies.
Yeah.
Oh, Rocky's not that.
My bad.
Was someone there on the second night? Because I was only there on the first night.
No, it was Julie
was there
and
Megan.
Is Megan on the line still? Or did we lose her?
I hope not.
I think she is.
Poor thing. Carol was there. Carol Lazarus, our lovely bilingual member of our group.
Yeah.
And the one thing that she said that I wanted to make sure I shared broadly is the fact that we are not getting our Spanish speakers out to these events because we are not having them in their areas. So she was saying that if we want to get their feedback, which we should want to get, we need to do something like at Oak Terrace or somewhere where they feel comfortable coming out and participating.
So we did have something set up early on, but then it didn't work out. We had an evening set up like at the very beginning.
And actually, the second night when you weren't there, I took to heart what you and Carol had said and ran into a very involved parent who served on the President's Council and has children at both Green Bay and Oak Terrace. And we talked to Nicholas, and I think that now we need to get to the other side of the forums probably, and then very quickly, and we talked a little bit with Link about how we could very quickly take the work that's been done and figure out how to coordinate some efforts to really reach out to that community and make sure that they have an opportunity to participate.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna reach out to Rosa, was her name, and we're gonna find a way to recruit. The issue is do we have it during the focus groups? Do we have it at the end of June? There's just not that much time before the models get narrowed to 3, but definitely post recommendation, that's gonna be a definite focus. There's that.
Is there music playing?
There is. It's like the slow jam from the mothership.
Recorder, I think it was recorded.
So that's it. Awesome, thank you. I think we need to figure out how to wrap things up. I also think we need to make a decision as to whether or not we're meeting on Thursday.
That's one decision. On the calendars of Phil.
Isn't that
Extra
two
days.
nights? That Thursday, this 2 nights?
I think originally the email I sent out, I had the 22nd down there.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, but the 15th actually appears to be work. 22nd seems to have a lot of conflicts for a lot of people. Can we do this Thursday?
I cannot do this Thursday, it's my son's birthday.
And we're still-
I can't do the 22nd.
Okay, we are not actually voting, but can we just, for informational purposes, get a show of hands as to who cannot come on Thursday?
I don't know.
What is the topic? Discuss.
We're gonna get the information from Roy in there.
Link is gonna finish up.
Is there a value just getting it out and we all talk Monday and take action on Monday?
I think that maybe let's
I'm a
just
little
all,
risky on that, but-
can we all agree in compliance with OMA to take our homework very seriously? So you now have a hard copy of everything that is online. Spend a lot of time on it, take it apart, put some pressure on it, ask some questions, and take whatever we get from Link on Thursday, I would suggest. I mean, I think that's useful, and then if we can make sure to have them on the call, or available to us on Monday night, can we work things that way and make sure that we're where we need to be? We also need to make sure that all of our focus group preparation is ready to be circulated and blessed by the board in advance of Wednesday night. So that will be driving the work on Monday night.
Discussion guides?
Yep. Just to put it in perspective, if we don't do the 22nd, the 28th is the meeting before July 5th. That could be a meeting night. That's
No, wait,
one
is that
meeting.
already in your email, the 28th? Yes.
Yes, it is.
But in addition to the 22nd? Yeah.
No, the 22nd is an add-on date, based on our Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Wednesday pattern we've been doing since the beginning of the year.
It seems like where we need the extra date, though, is after the focus groups. Like the 22nd is still right in the middle of the focus groups.
It's during the focus groups.
The intent was to get the decisions down, and unless the focus group produced anything that didn't support everything we've had today, then we'd go back and revisit. There's going to be a little less risk, in my view, because of how itchy people seem to be about making certain decisions. We just had a conversation tonight for almost an hour and a half just about the topics, much less making decisions and narrowing down. So I think we need to spend a lot of time on the front end just talking about how we're going to matrix these, how we're going to evaluate all these different variables that we have. Because they aren't quantitative data points. It's all warm fuzzies. You guys are going to have to collectively come to some decisions about that with all your data points you do have. What is this group going to come to consensus on? Not a deliberate vote, but.
Well, you could try and do what a lot of people do, just number them 1 through, if you think there's profit in keeping 8 still at this point. I don't really know why, but let's say there is. Can't people come in with a 1 through 8 vote and just see what's coming to the top?
We can, but there's also components of each of these that we have to have evaluation and discussion on as well. Is there value in 8 in middle school or 8 in elementary?
It seemed like we could throw 10 off the bus.
Kinder and gentler, a little bit.
I mean, I think Link's comment was Link's comment about whether or not we want a collaborative approach or a more consensus-based approach was a good one. And I have a feeling that given the process, I mean, I know I prefer the collaborative approach for now and give the board a wider range, a more diverse range of options. But
Well, that's what the
Can we, so given the fact that we're all going to be doing our homework, and I don't know in terms of the legal component, in terms of how this is noticed, can we decide to make a decision on Monday night as to whether we're showing all 8 to the focus groups? And we don't necessarily have to put it to a vote, but can we put it on the agenda?
Monday's not posted, so Monday we can create whatever agenda.
So let's make sure that if we need to vote on Monday, it's noticed appropriately.
Yep.
And we may or may not decide to vote. We might need to vote whether or not we're gonna vote. I don't know how this works.
Ronnie, at what point would, suppose there's a plan, whatever, like B prime or something like that, at what point because we talked about would we fold something like out an A and something like out something else together, at what point would we be able to submit or sort of talk about?
I think Melissa's exactly right, that we need something on the other side of the focus groups because we have.
So you think after the focus groups, we could talk, there'll be an opportunity to say, I want this of this and this and this, I'm gonna call B prime or H prime or whatever.
That's the 28th.
John, do we have, so we only have one meeting that week, the week of the 28th?
I'm sorry?
We only have one meeting notice for the last week of June. Do you all think that there would be more value in having 2 meetings next week or 2 meetings the subsequent week? And is that a little bit easier in terms of coordinating schedules? Is there better availability that last week of June than there is next week?
I can't come next week, I won't be able to. I'll be here Monday,
But you'll be here the week of the 26th.
Subsequent week, after focus groups.
I think that there would be.
Are we giving ourselves though enough, I mean, I don't know that it needs to be an or, it may need to be an and, because we also need to get our report together and our presentation, like we have a lot of
Some of this has to
pieces.
happen simultaneously, it just has to.
Yeah.
Let's say after the focus groups and after we've met, we're still sort of not sure because it's all relatively, some people have this idea, some people have that idea. Would it pay to get a board opinion at this time as to whether they want to see, of the 3 options that are given to the board, do they want to see everything in a certain cost group, or would you rather see an extreme group, a small group, a medium level, or a low-cost model, and then you decide?
I can't speak for the entire board, but I think that actually makes it makes a lot of sense having maybe some sort of a joint board 2.0 meeting if we could do it.
Well, we could do a
Don't we
workshop.
have that? It's
Workshop
on
of some
the
sort.
agenda, a workshop.
Well, we had one for
Tonight.
tonight was supposed to be a
Tonight
workshop.
was the one.
Oh.
But this is just getting the data raw.
Yeah,
We- we're-
I think that's a good idea because I think my sense is different board members have different impressions. But I made this point to Ronnie. I think at some point you guys have to pivot away from. You've done an admirable job of data collection, trying to be as even-handed in collecting everything. But at some point you've got to pivot to, putting this all together and having some sort of a vision, right? And that's,
I agree.
And that's something. And so you think about it. You've got to sell your plan to some extent. We want to adopt one of your plans. You got to sell your plan to us, and then we also have to at some point have to turn around and sell it. And I don't mean sell it in the sense we have to convince people.
Promote it.
Promote it. That's a
Sell it.
better word, right? Right, a better word. So for me, I like to hear the vision. It's not just a question of like looking at all the data points and trying to figure out something. You got to believe in it. You got to say, I believe in it. This is what I think the right thing. These are 3 different choices of ways we can go, and we have some passion about it. So.
Ronnie, you said twice about homework for Monday. I hear we should decide whether we want to ditch some plans. That would be one piece of homework.
Right.
Formulate
Pieces of homework?
an opinion, and then bring that opinion.
And
When
also-
we're looking at links data and what we've got so far.
And also really dig deep with what we have. I mean, I think that the other piece that we'll get from the forums, the focus groups, sorry. I just turned into a pumpkin 15 minutes ago. what we have from the forums are patterns and trends that we can recognize. What the focus groups will give us, granted with a much smaller sample, but with a great degree of specificity, is who is saying what. Because that's what we don't get. I mean, the Post-its are great, but unless you're like a handwriting expert or really know certain people, you don't know who said what. And who people are and where they are and what stage they are in, not just in their lives, but in terms of like their relationship to the district, really informs how they see all of this. So I do think that on the other side of the focus groups, it'll be really important to triangulate. But that said, we need to give ourselves enough time, and there's never enough time. And it's, I mean, so practically speaking,
I'd ask part of your homework for Monday night is to come with dates that we can be meeting that week, the 26th.
I think we need 2 meetings on the 26th.
2 meetings during that week.
Yes.
They're not on the email.
On the exit survey, do people have to identify, not their names, but where they are in life or anything?
There's
Nothing?
no demographic information there.
Before we leave, could I just ask John and Don, is there data that would, where we could get a reasonable estimate of a remodeled Northwood that isn't linking or doesn't have to be linking to Wayne Thomas as a comparison to the new Northwood with the sections as it's shown in Model A? Does that kind of exist, sort of?
I think it does. Let me confirm that. I
'Cause,
know, for example, when we use Northwood as an elementary school, that's a pretty good fit. There's very little remodeling associated with the Northwood Elementary School.
No, but I asked.
But we would require an addition, wouldn't we, for Northwood as well?
I think what we'd like to see is, like using the footprint, but making it a bigger school. So like, what would it look like if it were 2 stories on that footprint, but you're able to use some of the existing space? You're able to
I don't even want to go that far. That's not really, I don't want to design what it should be. Your best shot at a remodeled, that has some comparison to Edgewood, where there's some equity in terms of the education that the educational experience alone on that site.
So let me look at the information we have.
That's right.
See if there's a comparison that can be made.
Because I'm curious what would happen to A if we had that. And
I'll add one comment based on where you're at in the process right now. At some point, you're going to look at the designs for these individual buildings. And at some point, that's going to become a factor in the decision-making process. And I don't want to push that forward, but when Dan suggests that you get to a point in the process where you kind of pivot and think about the vision of this. If you look at the middle schools in particular and compare the middle school plans in particular, if you're looking to capture some kind of vision that has to do with the educational component, I think you're going to find it there. So again, I don't want to push that forward, but I think we're at a point in the process where it also wouldn't hurt to start to look at the middle school plans and the different options and think about, if I'm a kid going to a school there and I'm in 6th grade, here, and I have to go to world language or band, or my kid's interested in music, or because, the interesting thing about the middle schools is everybody in the school district is going to go to 1 or 2 middle schools. And you have common classrooms, more common classrooms than what the kids are going to use. So kids who are really interested in music are going to, they're going to go to different areas than STEM or CMA. So I think, as you think about making that pivot, starting to look at the middle schools and when we end up with 2 stories to realize a vision or something like that, I think it starts to maybe help to think about some of these broad issues that I've heard discussed tonight.
That is helpful, and I just have a practical question, and then I'd like to request a motion to adjourn. So if we are really looking to make the decision about the decision at the July 5th meeting, what kind of opportunity realistically between the 5th and the 18th would we have to make refinements if we have narrowed down to however many we've narrowed down
You
to,
mean
so
like
that.
an A+1, A or anything, fine, yeah. Sure. Depends on how big the ask.
I mean,
So,
in order to set everyone up to be successful, like what do we need to do? And is July 5th to July 18th realistic or not so realistic?
no, I think it's possible. I think it depends on how big of a variation it is from what we're looking at right now. We've looked at at enough different options, it's hard to imagine sitting here on that you're gonna come up with something entirely different. But the way the process will work is we have to first refine the drawing part of it, give it to Gilbane, they have to do refinement on the estimating part of it. But I think it's doable between the 5th and 18th.
So, before we move to motion, I apologize, I know it's late, but I think we're making a huge mistake by proceeding with 8 models to a focus group because they're not focusing on anything specific. So I think, and I've gone back and forth on this, and it's too late to make a decision now about it, but all we're doing is just pushing a bunch of things. We spent a year
Kicking the can.
focusing, not kicking the can.
And that not
Did
too many
someone
of us
say-
believe it. We don't
No,
even support
let me
it.
finish.
We don't even
Spending
support
a
it.
year analyzing this, we supposedly know better than the vast community because we spent so much time with all the experts talking about these things. We need to, at a point, start making some decisions and to take this and push the calendar out to a point where we're going to be under the gun to figure something out and present it to the board because we are still working under these 8 various models, I think is a huge error.
So we're not pushing it out, but the way that this meeting was noticed, we actually can't, even if we
I'm not-
felt like we were ready to
I'm
put
not
it to a
saying
vote
vote.
right now, we can't put it to a
No,
vote right
it's not-
now,
it's
but we
not-
are noticing Monday.
No, we
it's
said
not-
don't
it's
bring
not-
them to the
it's-
focus group.
Yes, it's not
Yeah.
voting
That's his
to
point.
table an issue, it's voting to focus in on a couple of, however many it is, models to really figure out where the focus group has issues.
So food for discussion on Monday after we've
Absolutely.
read all the feedback. Yeah.
I think that that's a great.
I mean, if we can continue to push these meetings and just end them because everyone's tired and done, or we can get something done.
No, I'm talking about on Monday night when we have the full feedback from the link.
I totally.
That's the time to make the call on whether 8 or something else goes into the focus group.
I just want to put out there though that
Yes.
you have 6 or 8, does that change what the focus group is really going to be asking about?
First, you're trying to focus.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the
No,
definition of focus group. is
I
focus.
understand, but that risk, there's a cost to that though. The risk of getting rid of something, even by perception, that you didn't give it the same due diligence or process.
But that goes back to.
We
you know,
did
are we-
give it, because we took these comments that we'll have taken link, so we will have been able to demonstrate that we did. And I don't know that they're gonna go with configurations, and that point, you're correct, John.
Yeah, but if they're
If you're not showing the
configuration-
specific configuration, if they're focusing, but
I
the
heard
greater
configuration.
point is to make the focus group be able to focus.
So I
No,
heard,
get that.
I heard specific configurations, but I want to see the exit surveys
You're not bringing.
But that's gonna be
supporting
ready by
or not
Thursday.
supporting that. And that's going to
That's
land
gonna
on
be ready by
Thursday.
Thursday.
And you're going to get that in your hot little mailboxes and you're going to read it all weekend and come back ready to have a conversation on Monday.
Do we have
Reality
reality
is,
Gilbane
managed
master
surveys will be
deck
confirmatory or
with
something
the single middle school language? Do we have that full?
I think that's it.
We should copy
Say it
it.
again, Darren, I can't hear
Is
you.
it- what-
Hey guys, can we have one conversation at a time? I'm sorry, because there's, Darren was talking over here too.
I know we can't vote per se, but waiting for the exit surveys, those are to be confirmatory for everything we heard that people wrote down, or they can be vastly different.
So we can make a
If we make the
recommendation.
assumption that they're going to be confirmatory, then we just lost a week waiting for that information.
Right, but so we'll have that on Thursday, so should we be meeting on Thursday?
If we have it on Thursday now.
You only lost a week if you believe that the answer is to reduce from 8.
Right? You lost a week if all we're going to get from the exit surveys is what we already know.
But we're not losing anything. I mean, if you,
I
your
think
point
we're
is.
losing something if we go with 8 configurations and have people talk.
Right, but there's a
That's my
counter,
opinion.
right, that's just another opinion, right?
That's all I'm saying, yeah.
So I think 8's right. I think we've got it so far, we should just carry it through. I think the more you narrow it down at this point, it's telegraphing we're narrowing it down, which maybe is fine, but you just showed a whole group of people 8, now you're gonna show another group of people something else.
No, we're gonna say we took that feedback and redirected it to.
We were always supposed to use, I thought, the forum to help focus. I thought that was the
that's why they're scheduled
the
that way.
stated purpose of it,
So
not
we have,
changing the
I think the
purpose.
we have 2 cases outlined
Yeah.
for what to do. So each person has to come with their own opinion about this so we can make a decision and move forward.
And each person has to come, because if we're going to potentially put anything to a vote on Monday night, we do need a quorum.
And beyond the reduction, you also have to start coming with a ranking.
A what?
A ranking. If we're not gonna have some Thursday night meeting, you're gonna have to start coming with some, this isn't gonna be a public and final data. You are gonna have to start coming, what you're gonna start ranking these as, and why. Just because as we get past the forum, the focus groups, we gotta have those conversations.
Okay, Connor, you can please send out a calendar about what time we're actually confirmed meeting?
I second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Sorry, can I add one thing? Sorry I missed it, I was teaching, but just so I know what's happening Monday. This is what I heard, yeah. I was teaching.
Walk in there.
Yeah, I was teaching, sorry. Are we on Monday deciding as a group whether we're going with A or not? And if we're not, narrowing, or are we deciding that we have already decided to narrow?
We're deciding on Monday.
We're deciding on Monday? So
We
there's
need
gonna
to
be-
wait and see, because what we got from Link doesn't include the exit surveys.
I understand that. So sort of part of Monday's meeting will be a clear decision point where we vote whether to go forward with A or less than.
Yes.
And then if less, we not. Okay.
Correct.
Exactly. Very helpful. Thank you.
And we're gonna get meaningful information, which may confirm or change what we
Understood.
Right, so, all those in favor of adjournment?
Absolutely.
Good night.